It was 4:45 a.m., deep in the South China Sea, when a silence-breaking flash ripped across the horizon. Satellites recorded it. Naval radars screamed it. An entire fleet braced for impact. What no one expected was that the first strike designed to cripple America's presence would be answered by something the world had never truly seen in combat. The $13 billion USS Gerald R. Ford, the United States Navy's crown jewel. Within minutes, the sea was alive with F-35C Lightning II jets launching from her deck, streaking into the sky like arrows of fire. The untold story is this. One ship, one carrier, changed the entire balance of power in the Pacific within a single morning. But what stopped an unstoppable strike? What secret systems turned vulnerability into dominance? Engage with us, comment, subscribe, and join this mission. The truth beneath the waves is finally revealed. The South China Sea is no stranger to tension, but this morning was different. Surveillance aircraft circled, destroyers tightened their formation, and the entire region seemed to hold its breath. For years, rival powers believed that if conflict erupted, America's carriers would be vulnerable, too large, too costly, too obvious. Yet as the Gerald R. Ford surged forward, its electromagnetic launch systems hummed with readiness, sending wave after wave of stealth fighters into the storm. The question now, could one supercarrier not only survive, but dominate in contested waters? Could technology, training, and doctrine rewrite what everyone thought was possible at sea? At precisely 5:15 a.m., the South China Sea erupted into a theater of controlled chaos. What began as a probing strike by long-range anti-ship missiles transformed into a full-scale test of America's most expensive warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford, valued at over $13 billion. The carrier strike group was on routine patrol, flanked by Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, and the silent shadows of two Virginia-class submarines operating ahead of the fleet. Reconnaissance drones confirmed the launch of shore-based missiles from fortified island outposts. For decades, analysts had warned, a carrier-killer strike could neutralize U.S. naval power in minutes. Yet on this morning, something else happened. At 5:20 a.m., radar operators aboard the cruiser USS Shiloh detected the incoming Wave 12 supersonic missiles, flying low, weaving to confuse defenses. Within seconds, the Aegis combat system engaged. Standard Missile 6 interceptors launched in rapid succession, streaking into the night sky. 7 targets were destroyed before they could close, but 5 slipped through, challenging the very premise of the carrier group's survival. Here, the Gerald R. Ford revealed her hidden strength. Layered defenses, close-in weapon systems, electronic jamming, and coordinated escorts neutralized 3 more. 2 missiles exploded in the sea, throwing plumes of water skyward but leaving the carrier untouched. It was the first proof that this supercarrier was not just a massive target, it was the center of a defensive fortress. By 5:30 a.m., the Ford's deck was a ballet of machinery. Catapults roared, though these were not the steam-powered systems of past generations. Instead, the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS, hurled F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters into the pre-dawn sky with unmatched efficiency. Each jet carried precision-guided munitions, electronic warfare pods, and long-range missiles designed to clear the air and strike distant batteries. Within 15 minutes, a swarm of 20 F-35Cs patrolled the skies. Their mission was twofold: establish air superiority and hunt down the missile batteries hidden on disputed reefs. Stealth and sensor fusion made these jets ghosts on radar, yet their presence electrified the battle space. At 6:10 a.m., satellite uplinks confirmed the location of mobile missile launchers concealed on reclaimed island airstrips. The Ford's air wings split into 2 squadrons. One group maintained combat air patrol, intercepting hostile aircraft attempting to approach the strike group. The other descended like hawks upon the island bases. Precision-guided Joint Direct Attack munitions, JDAMs, cratered runways, destroyed radar arrays, and silenced missile batteries. The spectacle was both shocking and decisive. A network built to deny U.S. carriers access had been crippled in under an hour, but the adversary was not finished. At 6:40 a.m., a squadron of 4th-generation fighters surged from a nearby coastal base. Though older, these jets carried heavy missile loads. The clash in the skies was inevitable. Here, the F-35C proved its worth. Using stealth, data link coordination, and advanced radar, the Lightning II struck before they could be seen. By 7 o'clock, the intended air assault had been broken apart. Only a handful of enemy fighters limped back to base. News traveled fast. By 7:30 a.m., headlines across the globe reported, U.S. Supercarrier engages in combat, emerges untouched. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. A ship long criticized as too costly, too vulnerable, had just redefined naval warfare. What no one expected was how quickly the Ford could turn defense into offense. Her power projection was not limited to the strike group, it rippled across the entire region. Allies felt reassured. Rivals felt exposed. The Gerald R. Ford was more than a ship. It was the embodiment of a doctrine: sea control through advanced technology, layered defense, and relentless projection of air power. The South China Sea, once thought to be an anti-access zone, was transformed into a proving ground. And the most shocking truth? This was not even the Ford operating at full capacity. With room for over 75 aircraft, advanced radar systems, and the ability to generate sorties faster than any carrier before her, the morning engagement was merely a glimpse of her potential. At 8:15 a.m., the battle reached its turning point. Enemy forces attempted a coordinated saturation strike missiles launched from sea, land, and air simultaneously. The tactic was designed to overwhelm, but the Gerald R. Ford, supported by her escorts, met the storm. Aegis destroyers intercepted long-range missiles. Submarines neutralized hostile vessels before they could close, and the carrier's air wing struck deep into hostile territory, severing the chain of command controlling the assault. By 9 o'clock, the skies were clear, the seas were silent, and the Ford sailed unscathed. Was this the moment America proved that the age of the carrier is not over, but only entering a new era? Was the investment of $13 billion justified in one morning's defense of international waters? Or does this battle reveal something deeper, the message that power at sea is not about numbers, but about who commands the future of technology? The truth is clear. In the South China Sea, the USS Gerald R. Ford did more than survive. She wrote a new doctrine in real time, and yet the story is only beginning. What comes next when rivals escalate further, when cyber warfare and space assets are drawn into the conflict? What hidden systems have yet to be revealed aboard this carrier? We will explore those questions, and much more, in the next chapter of this simulation. By 9:30 a.m., the South China Sea had transformed into a living chessboard of steel, fire, and precision. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the centerpiece of the carrier strike group, had weathered the storm of missile barrages and aerial thrusts. Yet what followed was even more unnerving. A coordinated campaign designed not only to strike the ship, but to fracture America's credibility. At 9:40 a.m., fleet networks flickered. Unusual patterns appeared across radar screens. A cyber intrusion, coordinated, aggressive, and aimed at the very nervous system of the strike group. The Gerald R. Ford's Cyber Defense Division activated instantly, isolating compromised nodes and rerouting communications through hardened satellite channels. The ship's crew had trained for this very moment, simulating electronic war as fiercely as they practiced gunnery drills. But the attempt revealed something darker. The adversary understood that brute force could not easily defeat the carrier. Instead, they sought to sow confusion, to sever the trust between systems and sailors. By 10:15 a.m., electronic jammers lit the spectrum. Enemy assets attempted to blind radar, scramble communications, and cloak approaching forces. The Ford responded with its own suite of countermeasures. Electronic attack pods on F-35Cs disrupted hostile frequencies, while Aegis systems recalibrated within seconds. What had once been invisible became visible again. The duel was not just in missiles and steel, it was in the invisible war of frequencies and signals. At 10:40 a.m., sonar operators aboard the Ford's escorts detected fast-moving contacts closing from the south. Enemy diesel-electric submarines, exploiting shallow waters and thermal layers, sought to close the distance. The Virginia-class submarine USS Illinois was already in position. Silent and predatory, it launched Mark 48 torpedoes at ranges the enemy could scarcely detect. Explosions rumbled beneath the surface, invisible to cameras but decisive in ensuring no hostile submarine could threaten the carrier's keel. At 11:15 a.m., the skies were once again tested. This time, A mixed formation of older fighter aircraft escorted long-range bombers, attempting to launch standoff missiles. The F-35Cs rose to meet them. In one of the most cinematic moments of the battle, stealth jets guided by shared data fused from satellites, AWACS, and shipboard radars struck in unison. Missiles streaked invisibly, breaking apart the formation before the bombers could even reach their release points. The untold story here was not just the technology, but the doctrine, the concept of distributed lethality. Every ship, every jet, every node in the network shared targeting information, meaning no single platform operated in isolation. The Gerald R. Ford was not a lone fortress, it was the brain of an interconnected war machine. By 12 noon, the Ford's strike package was launched again. This time, the mission was strategic suppression, to eliminate command and control facilities along the coastline suspected of directing the battle. Using standoff precision missiles, the F-35Cs struck bunkers, radar sites, and hardened command posts. Explosions echoed across contested reefs and artificial islands, not as a gesture of conquest, but as a calculated removal of tools meant to destabilize international waters. News outlets from Tokyo to Washington buzzed with disbelief. Critics had long argued that supercarriers were obsolete, vulnerable relics in a missile-saturated age. Yet the morning had proved otherwise. The Gerald R. Ford was not simply a target. It was a declaration technology. Training and layered defenses could blunt even the most aggressive strikes. Allies across Asia saw hope in this. The carrier's survival meant deterrence still held. Rivals, meanwhile, questioned their assumptions. If $13 billion could buy a ship that survives saturation attacks, then the balance of naval power was not tilted as they imagined. But at 1:30 p.m., a new dimension unfolded. Satellite operators monitoring the engagement detected hostile maneuvers in orbit, blinding lasers directed at surveillance satellites, attempts to disrupt the eyes that fed information to the Ford. The battle was no longer limited to sea and air, it had reached into space. Here, too, resilience was the answer. America's layered architecture, with redundant satellite constellations and hardened communication links, absorbed the interference. The Ford's commanders adapted instantly, shifting to secure channels and re-establishing uplinks. What could have blinded them only slowed them briefly. And yet, amid all the technology, the story was also human. Sailors rotated through combat stations. Pilots returned exhausted but determined. Engineers monitored every vibration of the carrier's massive propulsion system. Each decision, each correction, came from individuals trained not just to operate machines, but to anticipate the chaos of battle. One young radar officer later recalled, "At the moment I saw 12 missile tracks converging, I knew the textbooks said we would not survive, but the carrier did not flinch. We did not flinch." Is this why America invests billions into a single ship? Not merely for its weapons, but for the psychological power it projects, an unyielding message that no strike, however fierce, can erase its presence. Or does this reliance on a supercarrier invite escalation, daring rivals to pour resources into ever more desperate ways to counter it? By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the South China Sea was quiet once more. The Gerald R. Ford sailed onward, her deck alive with jets, her escorts alert, her systems humming, untouched, unbeaten, and unbowed. But in the silence that followed, another question arose. Had this battle ended, or had it merely entered its next, more dangerous phase? At precisely 3:15 p.m., as the Gerald R. Ford's battle group sailed through waters it now seemingly dominated, alarms pierced the calm once again. Radar operators froze as the screens lit up not with a dozen threats, but with hundreds. Tiny, fast-moving returns began flooding in from every compass point. These were not fighters. They were not missiles. They were something far more unnerving. The adversary had unleashed a hidden arsenal drone swarms, launched from disguised merchant ships, fishing vessels, and camouflaged island depots. Hundreds of autonomous craft skimmed the waves, programmed to strike the Ford and her escorts in a mass suicide wave. This was the weapon many strategists feared most. Numbers so overwhelming that even the strongest fortress could collapse. At 3:20 p.m., the strike group's combat information centers buzzed with urgency. Aegis radar screens filled with ghostly green blips. Officers watched as the swarm closed the gap in mere minutes. The traditional playbook missile interceptors, close-in guns, was never designed to handle such volume. The moment felt surreal, as if history's greatest warship had finally met a threat too unconventional to counter. And then everything changed. At 3:25 p.m., the Gerald R. Ford revealed a capability shrouded in secrecy. From her deck and escorts, beams of invisible energy fired outward. Directed energy weapons lasers silently carved the sky. One by one, drones erupted into balls of fire, collapsing into the sea without a single explosion from conventional ordnance. Electronic warfare suites amplified the assault. Jammers shredded communication links, forcing drones into spirals of confusion, some crashing harmlessly into the ocean. Close-in weapon systems joined the defense, cutting down the few that slipped through the energy net. For the first time, the world witnessed the convergence of old and new warfare. Steel and firepower fused with invisible beams of light. By 3:35 p.m., what should have been a devastating breakthrough became instead a revelation. The swarm had been meant to prove America's vulnerability, but it revealed something shocking. The Gerald R. Ford was not only shielded by missiles and guns, but by the future of warfare itself. Commentators around the globe scrambled to explain. Did the United States just demonstrate combat-ready lasers? One anchor asked live on air. The answer was undeniable. The age of directed energy had arrived not in a laboratory, not in theory, but in the crucible of real conflict. Satellites belonging to rival powers tracked every moment. Intelligence networks streamed the data home. Admirals in distant capitals analyzed the engagement frame by frame, aware that the balance of naval power had shifted again in a single hour. For some, this was cause for alarm. For others, it was a message. Escalation would only meet new layers of American technology, each one harder to counter than the last. By 3:50 p.m., the sea was littered with debris. The Ford's crew, exhausted yet unbowed, stood witness to a moment that history would record as transformative. A carrier once called too costly to risk had endured waves of missiles, submarines, cyber attacks, and now swarms and emerged untouched. But the deeper question lingers. Has this battle proved the invincibility of the supercarrier, or has it ignited a new arms race where adversaries will stop at nothing to crack the shield America just unveiled? Viewers, what do you believe? Was this a triumph of deterrence or the beginning of something more dangerous? Share your thoughts below. The battle for the South China Sea was more than a clash of steel. It was a live demonstration of doctrine, technology, and psychology. The USS Gerald R. Ford, once labeled too expensive, too vulnerable, had faced layered assaults and survived. But survival alone is not the lesson. The consequences ripple outward in ways far more enduring. For allies in Asia, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, the Gerald R. Ford stand is reassurance. It signals that America's forward presence is not symbolic, but real, capable of withstanding the most aggressive salvos. The message is clear. Freedom of navigation is not a theory, it is a practice, enforced by power that adversaries cannot easily blunt. Strategic consequence. 2. Adversaries redefine calculations. Rivals who once built strategies around carrier killers must reconsider. If missiles, submarines, cyber attacks, and drone swarms cannot sink America's flagship, then escalation risks becoming self-defeating. Each failed attempt only sharpens the perception of American dominance. But this realization will not end competition, it may accelerate innovation, pushing adversaries to invest in new forms of asymmetric warfare. The Ford validated distributed lethality. The idea that a network of platforms, all sharing data, magnifies the power of each. It is not just the carrier, it is the integration of destroyers, submarines, satellites, and stealth fighters into a single combat web. That doctrine, once debated in think tanks, now has battlefield proof, yet the price is staggering. $13 billion for a single hull, billions more in escorts, jets, and satellites. Critics will ask, is this sustainable? Admirals will respond, what is the price of deterrence if deterrence fails? And then there is the human factor. Sailors and pilots carried the weight of deterrence on their shoulders, proving that machines alone cannot win battles. It was their discipline, training, and calm under fire that turned doctrine into reality. Was this battle a victory, or was it a warning? Perhaps both. Victory, because the Gerald R. Ford proved its worth. Warning, because the demonstration ensures the next challenge will be fiercer, more complex, and more desperate. The lesson for the world: America remains a superpower at sea, not to wage conquest, but to maintain order. Power is not the enemy of peace, power is the price of it. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the sea was calm again. The USS Gerald R. sailed on, her deck scarred only by the smoke of departing jets, her hull untouched, her crew exhausted but unbroken. What had been meant to expose weakness had instead revealed strength. And yet, as history teaches us, moments of triumph are also moments of warning. The untold story here is not just that a $13 billion carrier proved its worth. It is that the balance of power in the Pacific shifted in a single day. What many believed was vulnerable proved resilient. What some claimed was obsolete proved indispensable. But with that revelation comes a burden. Deterrence only works as long as it is understood, respected, and maintained. This battle simulation reminds us that technology is never static. Every advance invites a counter. Every shield provokes a sharper spear. The Gerald R. Ford has shown that American carriers are not relics of the past, but keystones of modern deterrence. Yet the world should not misinterpret resilience as invincibility. The next strike may come from directions still unseen: cyberfronts, orbital platforms, artificial intelligence-driven weapons. What then is the true lesson? That peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of strength. The South China Sea is not merely contested waters. It is a stage upon which the future of global order is rehearsed. And in that rehearsal, America and its allies proved that preparation and investment in deterrence can keep open the pathways of freedom. Beyond steel and circuitry, the victory belongs to the sailors and aviators. Ordinary men and women carried out extraordinary actions under pressure. They launched jets in darkness, intercepted missiles with seconds to spare, and trusted their ship and each other with their lives. Their discipline is what transformed technology into triumph. Do we honor their vigilance enough? Or do we take for granted the shield they provide over oceans most will never see? So we ask you, the viewers, the citizens, the witnesses, was the Gerald R. Ford simply a ship proving its mettle? Or was it a symbol of something larger? Was it a machine of war, or a vessel of peace through strength? Should America and NATO continue to bear the burden of defending global commons, or must the world share in that responsibility? Your thoughts matter. Comment below. Debate. Disagree. Engage. Because national defense is not an abstract concept, it is the foundation of the world you live in. In the end, the Gerald R. Ford did not merely win a battle. It told a story that order is fragile, but it can be defended, that peace is not free, but earned, that strength deters chaos. The lesson is timeless. Peace demands power. Do not just watch history unfold from a distance. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe, comment, and share. Together, we shine light on the truths beneath the headlines. Together, we remember that vigilance is the price of freedom.